Hello, my name is Colin Urwin from Glenarm, down at the bottom end of the Glens, and I'm speaking to you from the old church in Cushendun. I'm going to tell you a story about the last Vikings in Ulster. 1,000 years ago, the Danish Viking hold on Ireland was finally broken at the Battle of Clontarf in the year 1014. The High King of Ireland, the great warrior chieftain Brian Boru, was killed that day, 23rd of April, Good Friday it was. Some said that he fell in battle. Others said that he was murdered in his tent as he knelt to pray by a fleeing Viking mercenary called Brodir. In any case, the hold on Ireland that had existed for years was broken. And as they severed all ties with Scandinavia, they swept north, this purge of Vikings from Ireland. Those who chose to remain converted to Christianity and were absorbed into Irish life. And the rest left. Well, the last two defiant Vikings were eventually cornered on the Antrim Plateau at a place called Garran Point, just north of the village of Carnlough. It was a father and his son. And they were the custodians of an ancient recipe for a heather mead, or as the Irish called it, Bjór Lochlanach, Viking beer. These last two Vikings, when they were eventually captured, were told that their lives would be spared if they taught the Irish brewers how to make this Viking beer. And the young man said to his father, "I would rather die than betray the secrets of our ancestors." His words were bold, and there was not the slightest hint of fear in his eyes. His father knew, however, that if they did not tell their captors what they wished to know, they would be tortured and probably face a slow and agonizing death. Well, with time and patience running out, the old man asked to speak to his captors alone. "My son," he said, "will never tell you the secrets of how to make the Viking beer. And I cannot bear that he should know that I have divulged that secret to you. Slay him first, and I will tell you what you need to know." And so the young man was brought out, and with one blow from a battle axe, he was executed. It was brutal, but mercifully painless and quick. As his body fell to the ground, his father cried, my son, forgive me." And then he looked at his captors and he spat at them. "Fleal the skin off my weary bones as you wish, but from me you will learn nothing." But they did learn something from that old man. They learned that a father's love for his son is one of the greatest things in the world. And with that, the old man flung himself off the cliffs at Garran Head. It is said that his final cry could be heard for miles, but that he took his secrets with him to Valhalla. When I was a young fella in the village of Glenarm, there were 5 pubs in the town. And on Friday and Saturday nights, the pubs were full of old characters. And they were mostly farming men and a lot of men who had gone to sea. And as someone put it to me, they were people who were never short of an answer. I'll give you an example of what I mean by that. There was one old character who drank a lot. He was in the pub every Friday and Saturday night. and he would get quite drunk. But every Lent he would go off the drink, and he would stay off the drink for 6 weeks, and that was his penance every year without fail, and he was well known for this. But one year he didn't make it to Easter Sunday, and the weekend before the end of Lent, he fell to the drink again. And he was coming down the street, and he was drunk, and of course the parish priest came around the bridge corner and met him and said, John, you have fallen off the wagon. I have, Father, he said. But you know, John, he said, our Lord out in the desert sacrificed 40 days and 40 nights. That's right, he did, Father, said John. But he only had to do it the once. And there were loads of characters like that. And I want to tell you about another John, a man called John Ray. What a character he was. John Ray was one of Glenarm's most famous sons. And John had gone to sea in the puffers back and forward to Scotland. And he had been born up in the countryside, up in Carnalbana. And all his older brothers were fiddle players, as was his father. But John was the youngest of the family, and he wanted to play some music as well. And so his father had constructed for him an instrument called a dulcimer, a hammered dulcimer, which is a strange contraption with strings strung across it horizontally, and it is played with two hammers. Well, John became very proficient in this rare and unusual instrument. And he became so good, in fact, that he even made records way back in the early 1970s. Back in the days when you had to be really good to be able to make a record. And the other big claim to fame that John had was that he played in the Royal Albert Hall in London along with the chieftains. And he was highly regarded across all these islands for his musicianship. But John was an ordinary man. He had been born and reared in the countryside. He loved nothing more than when he came home from his ship in Belfast to go up onto the moss to his little caravan that he kept there. And he would dig peat, and he would just live up there in peace and quiet and contemplate nature all around him. And one of my favourite stories about John Ray is one time he was coming back from his work in Belfast. And John never drove. He travelled everywhere, either by boat, by bus, or by train. And he had made his way down to Larne on the train. And he was waiting for the bus to take him to Glenarm. And he thought he would go into the Laharna Hotel, which stood on the corner of Old Glenarm Road at that time. And he went in for a drink. Well, he got talking to this rather attractive lady while he was in the bar. And they talked for a while, and I'm not sure if John caught the bus that he intended to catch, but anyway, he stayed for a while and had a few drinks with her. And then eventually she said to him, "Do you not know who I am?" And he said, "I'm afraid I don't." And she said, "I am a famous film actress." "Oh, well then that would explain it." He says, I never watch films. I never go to the cinema, or I don't watch TV or anything. And the lady he was talking to turned out to be Sophia Loren, who was on a tour of Ireland. And Sophia Loren was so taken by John that she ordered a taxi to take John home. And she bought a bottle of Bacardi. And she took John home with the bottle of Bacardi. John took her into his humble little abode in the town brae in Glenarm, and he entertained her for the rest of the evening, playing his dulcimer and telling her stories. And the taxi man sat outside with the engine running. And when they had drunk the bottle of Bacardi and Sophia Loren was suitably entertained, she got back into the taxi and back to her travels around Ireland. And John told that story in a BBC interview many, many years later. And I've written a wee song to commemorate John because I remember when I was a young fella in the bars playing on a Friday and Saturday night, because John didn't care whether it was the Royal Albert Hall or the little pub in the village where he would have went for a drink. As long as he was playing music, that was really all he was interested in. So I'm going to play you this wee song now. It's called Dulcimer Man. Haymaking in summertime at the home place years ago. A big jam piece and cold milk from a can. Dark nights by the fireside, learning tunes by ear. It's where you'll find John Ray, the Dulcimer Man. Dulcimer Man, Dulcimer Man. From the bright lights to his little caravan. Dulcimer Man, Dulcimer Man. As easy with the humble as the grand. Royal Albert Hall in London, or the folk club by the docks. For fame and wealth he never gave it down. Or the back room of a Friday night in the pub in our hometown. It's where you'll find John Ray, the Dulcimer Man. Dulcimer Man, Dulcimer Man. From the bright lights to his little caravan. Dulcimer Man, Dulcimer Man. As easy with the humble as the grand. Sailing back to Belfast on a coaster from the Clyde. A sailor who never lost sight of the land. Or sitting in the hotel bar with Sophia Loren. It's where you'll find John Ray, the Dulcimer Man. Dulcimer Man, Dulcimer Man. From the bright lights to his own wee caravan. Dulcimer Man, Dulcimer Man. As easy with the humble as the grand. Waking to the curlew, softly singing in the dawn. A mug of tea and bacon in the pan. His idea of paradise was a lonely heather bog. It's where you'll find John Ray, the Dulcimer Man. And I recall the fire burning low, the crooked pipe hanging from his mouth, the hell for leather drum of heel and toe, and every single note is ringing out. Dulcimer Man, Dulcimer Man. From the bright lights to his own wee caravan. Dulcimer Man, Dulcimer Man. As easy with the humble as the grand. And when he died they played the pipes and fiddles over him, and they came from every corner of the land. And that quiet village graveyard never saw the likes before, and that's where you'll find John Ray, the Dulcimer Man. Dulcimer Man, Dulcimer Man. From the bright lights to his little caravan. Dulcimer Man, Dulcimer Man. As easy with the humble as the grand. As easy with the humble as the grand. dulcimer mile. It was. Scahach, which means shadow, translated from the Gaelic, was an ancient Celtic warrior queen or goddess, some said. And when she came to live in the mountains of the island that would take her name, no one really knows. But come to the Isle of Skye, she did. She chose her seat among the mountains, and it was known as Dun Skye, the fortress of shadows. And from there, she founded a school for Celtic heroes to come and learn the art of warfare. Well, one of her most famous students was Cushendun, the great Ulster hero. And when he heard about Scahach and her school, he came over from Ireland. And Cushendun was full of himself, shall we say, a little bit conceited. And to gain the respect that he felt his reputation deserved, he challenged each and every one of Scahach's students. And one by one, he defeated them. You see, Cushendun's reputation as a ferocious, fearsome, fearless warrior was second to none. But Scahach was playing very cool towards him. She remained aloof. She wasn't impressed by the reputation that he had in battle, that said that he could defeat entire armies single-handed. You see, it was also said of Cushendun that after battle, 3 vats of ice-cold water had to be prepared for him. The first one that he immersed himself off blew off in steam. The second boiled over like a pot on an untended fire. And the third one came to a nice warm temperature where Cushendun could wash off the sweat and blood and gore of battle. None of this impressed Scahach. But after a while, she could not ignore his prowess any longer. And so she sent her daughter to defeat Cushendun. They engaged in battle, and they fought for 2 days and 2 nights. And they were a match for one another, but eventually Cushendun defeated her very narrowly. Well, Scahach was furious. She came down from her fortress of shadows. She called to all the other heroes, "Come and be learned, for ye will never see the likes of this again." And then she lifted her battle axe and she clashed with Cushendun in battle. And no one had ever seen the likes before. They fought for 3 days and 3 nights over mountain, moor, and marsh. Scahach's daughter could see in her mother's eyes that she intended to fight to the death if necessary, rather than allow Cushendun to defeat her. And so she milked a red deer hind. She soured the milk, and she made her mother's favourite crowdy cheese. Then she baked a loaf, fresh bread, and she wafted those smells towards the 2 battling warriors. She begged them to lay down their arms and sit down and refresh themselves, but both refused. So she caught a salmon in the river. She cooked it over an open fire until its flesh was pink and moist and the juice was dripping from it. The skin was crisp and golden brown. The scent of that salmon, she wafted it towards them. But neither would give over their fight. Then she slew a wild boar. She put it on a spit over the fire. She stuffed it with hazelnuts that she collected from the trees that grow by the burn on the slopes of Ben Broch. Now, these hazelnuts were long known to contain the wisdom that would allow one or other of them to defeat their opponent. And when they smelt the roasting hazelnuts, they immediately and together realized one taste of those hazelnuts would give me the power to defeat my rival. And so they laid down their arms. They sat down, very civilized, and they dined together. And the moment they tasted those hazelnuts, they both realized that neither one could defeat the other. They arose from that table, and everyone who was there expected them to engage in mortal combat. But they didn't. They kissed and embraced one another. And they made a pact of peace there and then. They promised one another that if ever either one of them needed help, all they would have to do is ask, and it would be given. Even, they vowed, should the heavens fall upon them. Well, it was said that night, Scahach took Cushendun as her lover. How long he stayed in Skye, well, no one really knows. But he came back here to Ulster, where, of course, his exploits literally became the stuff of legend. Scahach remained in her fortress of shadows up in those mountains. But as a mark of her respect and her admiration and her love, I suppose, for Cushendun, she named those mountains Cushendun's Hills. And that is the name that they bear to this very day. I'm going to sing a very old folk song now. It's been recorded by everybody from the Dubliners to the Clancy brothers. And you'll all know it. And you can join in at home there and clap your hands if you wish. It's called Home Boys Home. Oh, well, who wouldn't he be, a sailor lad sailing o'er the main, to gain the goodwill of his captain's good name? I went ashore one evening for to fee, and that was the beginning of me own true love and me. And it's home, boys, home. Home I'd like to be, home for a while in me own country, where the oak and the ash and the bonny rowan tree are all a-growing green in the north country. Well, I asked her for a candle for to light me up to bed, likewise for a handkerchief to tie around me head. Well, she tended to me needs like a young girl ought to do. So then I says to her, now won't you jump in with me too? And it's home, boys, home. Home I'd like to be, home for a while in me own country, where the oak and the ash and the bonny rowan tree are all a-growing green in the north country. Well, she jumped into bed, making no alarm, thinking that a sailor lad could do to her no harm. Well, I hugged her and I kissed her the whole night long. She wished the short night had been 7 years long. And it's home, boys, home. Home I'd like to be, home for a while in me own country, where the oak and the ash and the bonny rowan tree are all a-growing green in the north country. Well, early next morning the sailor lad arose, and into Mary's apron threw a handful of gold, saying, take this, me dear, for the damage that I done. The night I fear I left you away, a daughter or a son. And it's home, boys, home. Home I like to be, home for a while in me own country, where the oak and the ash and the bonny rowan tree are all a-growing green in the north country. Well, if it be a girl child, send her out to work, with gold in her pocket and with silver in her purse. And if it be a boy child, he'll wear the jacket blue and go climbing up the rigging like his daddy used to do. And it's home, boys, home. Home I like to be, home for a while in me own country, where the oak and the ash and the bonny rowan tree are all a-growing green in the north country. Welcome all ye young fair maids, a warning take be me. Never let a sailor lad an inch above your knee, for I trusted one, and he beguiled me, and he left me way a pair of twins to dangle on me knee. And it's home, boys, home. Home I like to be, home for a while in me own country, where the oak and the ash and the bonny rowan tree are all a-growing green in the north country. And it's home, boys, home. Home I'd like to be, home for a while in me own country, where the oak and the ash and the bonny rowan tree are all a-growing green in the north country.